You wrote an interesting article on Forbes about green hushing. Is that like not to be confused with huffing,
Yes.
or something like that? What's uh,
Yeah.
what's going on here?
So green hushing, I thought this was an interesting thing. There was a statistic that came out that said that in the most recent earnings calls, that the discussion around sustainability had dropped somewhere around 35%, where in previous quarters it had increased. So companies were really, going all gung ho on sustainability in earnings calls. So this doesn't necessarily mean that they're not doing it. It just means that the way in which they're talking about it has changed. Um, and I think there's several reasons for this. One, there's some backlash in terms of, there's the potential of the fear that it's greenwashing. So there's green hushing and there's greenwashing. Um,
That's okay. Interesting.
so green hushing basically is the silence around sustainability objectives, goals, initiatives because of the fear of greenwashing, the fear of backlash, the fear of investors saying focus on the work, stop worrying about these initiatives. You need to, here are your targets, focus on that. Um, and so, during, for instance, the 6-5 Summit, I got to talk to a couple of people about their ESG goals. They are very much tied to their business outcomes. And so I think there's a point in which, and there's regulation coming up from the SEC, that companies, publicly traded companies, will have to disclose their ESG initiatives in their financials. So I think we just have to, my opinion is this has to become not a political conversation. The fear, I think, where people have stopped talking about it is that they don't want the backlash. They don't want people, taking a political stance on this. So it just has to become, if there's regulation around it and you say you just need to report these things, come at it from a business perspective, keep the politics out of it. It's hard to kind of wrap my head around, anyone's head around, like regulation, regulate it to keep the politics out of it. That
Yeah.
seems sort of, counterintuitive, but really to put some regulation around it from a financial standpoint sort of does take the politics out of it because it takes people's opinions out of it. It's not is this good or bad? It's just, in terms of SEC disclosures, you can have an opinion about financials, but dollars don't care. They don't care about your feelings. So same thing about carbon emissions. It doesn't care about your feelings, just, report it. So I just thought this was an interesting trend that companies have changed the way in which they're talking about their sustainability in just, the last quarter, the last couple, I guess, the last couple of quarters. So that
Yeah.
was,
So I think we all saw this coming. You and I have discussed this on numerous occasions. And, whenever anything, I mean, heck, like generative AI, when anything spikes, right, there's going to be backlash, there's going to be discussion about that. And I think a lot of people thought that that was very healthy discussions that we were having about generative AI.
yeah.
I actually think these are very healthy discussions too. I think we've seen, particularly on the environmental side, what has happened when people made dictates and didn't really fully comprehend the downstream effects. Kind of like, you know, Europe locking itself to Russia
Mm-hmm.
for natural gas, and giving Russia an economic weapon to use against them. Countries like Sri Lanka that get a 98% ESG score, and then they get a coup because they can't grow enough food, right? So I think these are very healthy types of things, and I think I haven't seen a single statistic that says we have nearly enough power to even power 50% of cars if they were electric. as well. And by the way, China has decided to cut off the U.S. of two key minerals it takes to make semiconductors. And do you know where most of the minerals to make EV batteries come from? Either China or what is regarded to as slave labor in the middle of Africa, right? So, you know, thinking through this is probably a good thing. I think where this got sideways, and you probably also saw that the House Republicans sent BlackRock, Vanguard, and others on them kind of mixing ESG with stock picks, right?
Right.
So yeah, I mean, we kind of all knew that it would happen, and you know, we first saw the social aspects being pulled back. There were some groups that people gave a lot of money to that ended up, you know, ended up getting indicted. That the money wasn't actually used to be helping those people, and that's the first pull off. And now the environmental part of it is the second shoe to drop. And you know, we haven't seen the G in governance. Nobody was really ever debating that, but the E and the S in the ESG. And by the way, you're just such a clever person and a clever writer, and I have to point out your ESG in your Forbes article. But anyways, check that out in the show notes. It's a really good article.